The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, Techbytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Welcome back to another episode of the Techbytes podcast powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and this week I'm really excited to have another conversation from the floor of NRF Asia with Asif Khan, who is the CEO, founder, chairman, and everything of the LBMA, the Location-Based Marketing Association. But we'll get into that in just a second. But actually, as we think about it, I need to be very clear that this is episode number 2001, because he told me he's been on about 2,000 of these already. So I just want to make sure we get it right. So welcome to Techbytes.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
Okay. So sometimes you actually have to go somewhere else to run into people and have those meaningful conversations. And Asif has always been very kind to invite the IFBTA to participate in his events. But you're probably wondering, well, you shouldn't be wondering, but we're going to make sure you know. So tell us about the LBMA.
Yeah, so the Location-Based Marketing Association, we've been around now for 14 years. We're a global nonprofit member-based community, really there to promote the value of geospatial location data and proximity and everything it kind of touches in between. We really are about seeing the world as this intersection of what we call people, places, and media. You know, in your world, you might be in a restaurant, you might be on your way to a restaurant, you might have just left a restaurant, but you're always in a place, you're always in a location, and there's always some sort of media that can influence you in that place, right? It might be a digital screen or menu board in some of your contexts. It might be radio while you're driving your car or something in the navigation system that's driving you to that restaurant. Or it might be something afterwards when you get home on television.
Well, first of all, that's a lot of some things. So the question I always ask people, like if I'm walking this floor here, I'm going to ask somebody who has a startup company or they have something, how did you actually come up with that idea? Because it's really interesting when you look at somebody's background. Sometimes you talk to a tech person, they have something for a bar and they tell you, well, when I was in college, I used to go to the bar and the bartender told me we needed this. Then, of course, I always ask them, well, did you actually look to see if it existed? But who knows? So what was the idea behind and how did you actually, decide this was something to start a global association?
So I was running another startup providing Wi-Fi in restaurants. So this was in 2008 when you had to pay for Wi-Fi still in those days. So we were running free Wi-Fi in restaurants up in Canada. In exchange, you had to watch a location-based ad. And when I sold the company, as you do, you have non-competes. And at that time, we had just the emergence in 2009, 2010 of early days of location. So Foursquare launched that year. Gowalla launched that year. Google launched Latitude.
Did you know that I was the Foursquare, what do we call him, a mayor?
Yeah,
right?
mayor.
So I was the mayor in about 30 different Starbucks all at once every day, but they were all over the world. And I'm not sure why I even got into this, but I think this went on for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
I found this program that allowed me to change the location on my phone.
Yep.
And every morning I would get up early and I'd change the location. Now I'm in Hong Kong, now I'm in London.
Right.
And yet I'm the mayor of all
You're the mayor of all
the most check-ins because I had to do
Yeah,
these check-ins.
absolutely.
Like, how the hell you do that, right?
But yeah, to answer,
You know how the hell you do
yeah, I know how you do that. But to answer your question, so when I sold this company, I have this non-compete, and all these guys were starting location stuff, and I'm like, this is going to be a big wave. And I'm like, how can I stay involved in this without violating my thing? So the legal maneuver was set up a nonprofit trade association that represents all of these companies. So Foursquare became a member, and Gowalla became a member, and all these guys became members, the first members of the LBMA.
So most of them were the suppliers that became the members.
Initially, and then we started bringing the brands in and the agencies. And
It really isn't it all about the brands?
It's always about the brand. Well, it's about how you connect the supply side to the brand side, and that's really our mission. So at our events, 50% of the people there are the brands. Right?
So it's what you're talking about covers so many different things. So how many different industries or how many different groups, are represented? Because I've basically seen you guys at like shopping mall, conferences and things like that. But early on, I remember looking at them, there were airlines, there were all kinds of people, hotels at them. So is there a core group or is it really everybody or?
I would say it's primarily consumer-facing brands, whether that's restaurants, tourism, retail itself. right? Sports, we do a lot of work in sports. We have a lot of teams and leagues and things like that as well. So it's anywhere where there's a consumer-facing brand. We don't do a lot of B2B in what we do today. It's really the consumer-facing brand. So there's no limit to kind of the industries, I would say. But what really brings us together and what kind of differentiates us from, let's say, the Digital Signage Federation or the IAB or the Mobile Marketing Association is that, it's this location data that unites all of those things. You can't measure attribution on a digital screen without foot traffic analytics around it, which is location data.
Which, by the way, here at this show, there's a number of people that are doing, tracking foot traffic, and that's actually been around for a while.
Exactly, right? So all of these things are, you talk about the metaverse and augmented reality and all this kind of stuff, right? You can't have augmented reality without a marker that gives you a position to activate it, right? That's location based. You talk about mobile payments. When you tap to pay for something, it requires proximity recognition of where you are to do that. That's location, right? So we're not beholden to one of these buckets. Like, we look at how that data unites across all of it.
But it's really working behind the scenes. I mean, it isn't something that the consumer is totally aware of, nor do they need to be. It's really more of not how to get my data or know where I am, but just delivering the right message at the right time based upon where they are, right?
People, places, media. Yeah.
People, places, media. Okay, so if we have that in place, do we end up with challenges and how people actually put that all together so that they don't, get the consumer upset, or they don't worry about the privacy or the big brother's tracking me?
Yeah, I think from the early days, 14 years ago to now, a lot has changed on the privacy rules and regulations. We've been obviously part of that conversation. But I think that in today's world, it's very different, where the consumer is much more knowledgeable. They're much more educated about, sort of the digital fingerprint that they leave behind than they were, 14 years ago. And so
They're also starting to be concerned about who owns the data.
Yeah, it's always about who owns the data, what rights do they have to use it, what access do I have to it to retrieve it if I want to take it away from who's holding it right now. There's all these different aspects to that. But at the end of the day, we always say to the supply side or to the brands who are putting apps out there that require or asking for location data is, what is the value exchange that you're offering to that consumer for their data? Nobody complains about Uber having their data because you need it in order to facilitate that driver coming to you.
To that point,
there's a utility.
Yeah, but you know what? To that point, I had a conversation with somebody last week with Paul Barron, and we were having this conversation on the Tech Report, and we were talking about how companies are starting to take back their data instead of allowing people to post on Yelp, post on us, but we own the data. And then we were talking about, but our customers going to let them forever use, their voice and their data. And forever's a long time, right? As we all know, and that stuff lives out there. And so whether it's Meta or, whatever it is that's out there, they own that data. And supposedly you're getting some sort of convenience for it. I think over time, what's going to happen here is there's going to be legislation that's coming about now because what's her name? Charlene Theron.
Yeah.
Is that who it is who thinks their voice is being used, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe it isn't their voice, but boy, it's awfully close. And who gives permission to do that? So I bet you over time, somebody's going to have the right not to just say how their data is used, but to actually say, I want my data back. And some governmental authority is going to say, you know what? Data really belongs to you.
Yeah, but that's been a thing for a long time. I mentioned Goala, like the early competitor to Foursquare, right? Back in the day. And, they were side by side running in terms of, customer acquisition and users and all of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, Goala got acquired by Facebook. This would have been around 2012 or 13, okay? And so immediately, Goala at that time had a huge fan base of following people who loved them. The minute Facebook acquired them, all those users said, I don't want Facebook to have my data. I'm okay with Goala having it, but now Facebook owns that company. So it's not just like, who has my data? Who did I give it to? But like, is that data, like if that company gets bought by somebody else?
Yeah, nobody ever thinks about that, right?
Nobody thinks about that.
Especially like loyalty programs and things too, right?
Right.
I signed up with you, but I might not have signed up. Maybe I signed up with you and I didn't really like the other brand, which is why I signed up with you. And now you get acquired. So now what?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right. So there's all these sort of follow-on considerations that we got to look into.
So you've been doing this for 15 years?
14, yeah.
14 years. Okay. So 14 years in 2001 episodes. Got that. So, I'm going to give you a hard time. It's fine. Okay, good. So
our own podcast is only 673 episodes. So
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you're in the startup of Techbytes because we converted it over. So we don't, we're nowhere near that, but we got a bunch to go. So anyway, so if we think about that, that's a lot of time. And as you point out, the technology and the data available has changed. And, you've seen a lot of that. So, in the journey, where are we today as far as the data that's available for people to address their marketing or integrate it that they may not actually be aware of or think about?
I think that there's a lot of data that we're throwing off, right? And I think what's changed in the last couple of years, I would say like since COVID, is in our world.
There's a lot more data since COVID because everybody went to e-commerce and they went to online ordering.
There's tons,
especially the restaurant industry.
There's a ton of data, but here's what I would say in our world that shifted is that it used to be pre-COVID that when you were doing as a brand, a restaurant chain or a retail chain, and you were doing location-based ad targeting, let's say, that was individualized, that was personalized. It was like, hey, Rob, we see you're here. Here's an offer as you walk by McDonald's to come on in.
But you may have to opt in for that.
Yes, if you have the app or something like that. But what's changed now is nobody's doing that anymore. It's not that one-to-one anymore. It's now we're tracking everybody where they go, and we're building audience, personas of people who are similar, who have the same behavioral patterns in the same places that they go, and we target the group with the same message.
Okay, so I don't know, how many years ago was the term one-to-one marketing being, like if you went to a trade show here? 10 years ago. So what's the current term?
It's audience or persona-based marketing.
Okay, so I heard what you said, persona-based marketing. However, what I keep hearing here is personalization, which is different.
It's viewed as personalization still, but it's not one-to-one. It's personalizing that, like, if I track a whole bunch of people who are going to Cubs games, right? I know you're a Cubs fan.
So it's putting together a general profile.
It's a profile based on physical movement and behavior in our world, right? And so I can target you with an ad for merchandise, let's say for, Wrigley Field or the Cubs or something like that, knowing that you're a regular visitor to Cubs games.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that, well, first of all,
I don't know your name though. I'm not targeting it to you.
Exactly. Unless I opt in.
Unless you opt in.
Right, and I should opt in because I want to get something. But, I get that. So you don't really have to. So I wonder how exact the data is out there right now that you actually, without knowing my name, can do a hell of a profile because there's so much data, we just don't understand where it's collected. And just as an example, even walking this floor, and I've seen this for years, right? Somebody had digital signage there with a camera on it. And so they're judging, not just, happy or not, and, your sentiment or something score, but they're judging man, woman, your approximate age, and they were changing the ads, on there based upon who was standing in front of it, right? Well, that one thing itself gives a lot of data about the person standing in front of you.
Yes, and we have lots of member companies who provide those kinds of solutions. The challenge right now is to make sure, and again, it's always about education. It's always about how you articulate. So it's what they're doing and what everybody in that space is doing right now is what we're calling facial detection. Very different than what we call facial recognition.
Yeah, because recognition would be
that's privacy violation, right? Whereas this just says we have algorithms that say that face makeup and structure and whatever is a male or a female, and it's approximately within this age group based on what we see and those kinds of things. That's detection.
Well, listen, let's just take a break for a moment. I need to catch my breath here, because there's just a whole bunch of subjects you're bringing up here in discussion. So we'll come back in just a minute.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and sort of continue this conversation because there's just too much data out there and nobody ever thinks about it. But when I say nobody thinks about it, I don't think the consumer knows how much is out there. But actually, especially in like the hotel restaurant market, maybe retailers are ahead. Hotel people, gaming people, and airline people have sort of data because they got to know who you are.
Yeah.
Okay, so they actually know who you are and can track that. but the food service industry just seems to be rather slow to be in this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say yes. In general, they're catching up, to everybody else. But it does create opportunities where, they can leapfrog at times, right? Because they've seen what
Right.
everybody
You
else
go
has
from
has
nothing
been done,
to
right? Like you look at what, like, for example, Domino's is doing with AI right now on, trying to facilitate, inbound phone call analysis, voice analysis, and ordering based on, recognizing the voice and those kinds of things, right? Like retailers aren't doing that today.
Are they going to use that to go ahead and figure out what the person might order?
They knew what they ordered last
Look, I
time
knew
based
a
on their
technology
voice.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's called hyperactive Bob.
Yeah.
And it went by the wayside because it was before its time.
Yeah.
So, by the way, that's going to be my next question for you, so you can prepare, is what was before its time that's finally coming around. So there are always stories like that. But hyperactive Bob, I'm giving you a second to think about it. So hyperactive Bob had a camera on the back of QSR restaurants. And as the car drove around, it did a direct correlation between the type of car and what they might order. So if it's a mommy van, had that. Now, somebody got smart at some point and said, well, why don't we take a picture of the license plate? Well, okay, that stopped that. So they couldn't do that because they were now pairing the car with who the owner was in there. But they were doing it, and they brought it out for chicken restaurants because it takes a while to make chicken. So you need to know who's in line. You got to have the right chicken, right? Anyway, so that was before its time. But today, what you're describing is if we have a camera and we're able to figure out who the people are, and there are cameras everywhere, as we all know, and we can look at their sentiment, and we can look at their weight, their height. We can start actually suggestively selling them things that,
Yeah.
maybe we think they're going to be interested in. So, what is the stories that are out there of things that were before their time, but you sit there and you go, I've seen this before, and everybody else thinks it's new.
Well, I think so. Coming back to the facial detection and recognition thing, I think on the recognition side, if they've opted in, if there's loyalty programs and those kinds of things, like KFC's done a lot of this, right, with their kiosks in Asia here, where you can go up to the thing, there's a camera in the kiosk, the ordering kiosk, it recognizes you, it knows what your order was last time, and pops that up on the screen. So there's things like that, Pop ID, companies like that are doing those kinds of things.
Yeah,
today,
but you know what?
right?
What happens is the consumers start to accept these things the more they use them.
Yeah.
So the privacy matters go by the wayside. And it occurs to me coming here into Singapore and also leaving and coming in the United States now to go into, not immigration, but just regular, security. They're taking a picture of your face. And
Yeah.
I remember 10, 15 years ago, they wanted to picture my face here. By the way, then they started to get it because they had SARS. Then they were doing temperature monitoring. Then
Yeah, but wasn't
so we're
that
doing it anyway, right?
Wasn't the 45-second immigration process brilliant for you?
Yeah, that was great.
I'd much rather do that than stand in line
Right,
for
so
like an
we're
hour.
getting used to giving it away,
Yeah.
right?
Again, value exchange, utility.
Yeah, here's the secret thing. I'm going to give you one of my business cards, which I shouldn't even give you a card anyway because I shouldn't have a card. But in my signature line, only 2 weeks ago did I put my mobile phone because I just did not want to give out my mobile phone. Instead of what I did is I gave out a mobile PBX, so we can find me wherever I was at. But I've given up because I got to give my mobile phone for everything because everybody assumes that you're going to give them their mobile phone number, the doctor's office, the prescriptions. So what's the point? So I'm going to give it out. So facial recognition, I think, is going to go by the same way.
Yes, I agree.
I did say recognition.
I agree.
Right? So
I
it's gonna
agree.
go by the same way.
And I can give you the same story in retail, right? So we saw this big wave the last couple of years of all this automated self-checkouts and all this kind of stuff. And then we find out even Amazon with their Go technologies got people sitting in India watching cameras and faking it all. Right? We have retailers
Okay, what's the
across
story?
the U.S.
I don't know the
We have
story.
retailer after retailer across the U.S. saying we're pulling our self-checkouts out. They're not working. There's too much loss. The loss prevention side is killing them. Right? People are stealing stuff because they're not paying for it. They're just
Right.
They're not scanning. Like they take 10 items and they scan 6.
And they
walk
had
out.
people in a call center watching.
Yeah, in India.
So they were like sleeping, so they weren't watching it.
Yeah,
So
supposedly it was all automated, but it wasn't.
So it's funny. I went to
So-
an Amazon Go store in the very early days. I went to Amazon's headquarters in Seattle, and I went in there, and I'm going to be an honest guy. So they were explaining to me how the technology worked. And I said, "Do you mind if I try an experiment?" I said, "You can watch me, but I'm not stealing any, right?" So I went and I took a bottle off the shelf. I forget what it was, and I drank it, and I put it back on the shelf. Didn't get charged, And I said, "Boy, I guess there's some holes here, right?" But but more and more airports are now back to putting in, well, I guess because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Are putting in unattended operations. Hotels are doing
Yeah.
micro markets, you know. So
But the retailers were the first. And now most of them are many of them, Walmart, Kroger, CVS, are cutting back on that.
So some of the hottest things in retail / food service, and by the way, what I'm about to say is also pretty hot in retail in general, but I don't see it out there as much as vending. And I'm not exactly sure. So we have micro markets, which are markets. I get that, you know, touch and feel, and it's got shelves and it's got stuff, right? But vending is sort of interesting to me. When I see a CVS, you know, it has a vending machine, Apple's got a vending machine, you know, okay, I get that. Now we see all the fresh baked products, and we see freshly made pizzas and stuff being done at vending. So what I've noticed though is they all have screens on.
Yeah.
So how are we going to start personalizing, or how are we going to do that marketing to them when we start going to these totally remote stores that are really restaurant in a box, store in a box, and we do something on the screen? Are we going to sell it to them, or are we going to have somebody come from the screen like in The Gap on with Tom Cruise? I forget the movie right now, Minority Report, where they say, "Welcome to The Gap, Mr. Yamashita," and they did this thing, right? Are the machines going to start walking on now? They get terminated.
No,
right?
I don't think so. I think in the world we're at today, and I can give you real examples. Like, I mean, so what you're going to see is those vending machines, those screens are going to have built-in sensors to them, Bluetooth sensors or other sensors that are connected to the apps that people have on their phones. We'll be collecting data from that, so we'll be able to say, here's how many people were at that vending machine today.
Am I able to
Here's how
protect
many things were
Am
there.
I able to protect what's on my phone from them being? I'm not talking about opting in on an app, but there is certain data that you were in the phone business, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's certain data you get off the phones just because it's there,
Correct.
right? And is that what we're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. So there's the two levels of it. There's the opted in personalized stuff. So for example, in Japan, every Coca-Cola vending machine in the country has a Bluetooth sensor built into it. There's a Coca-Cola app, you know, for consumers. They can go around, they can, you know, take a Coke from the vending machine, they can earn points for that. You know, there's this whole connectivity piece, right? And a data analytics piece. Then there's the anonymized side of all these vending machines have sensors. We don't have a personal relationship with the individual. There's no app necessarily, but we're able to pull analytics from cell phone data and other things that say, here's how many people interacted with that machine today. Here's how many people walked by it today. Same as we do with measuring digital out of home, right? It's the same.
So what is it that you believe the future, the next step is going to be?
That's a hard question.
Well, nobody can predict the future, but some of the markers are there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we're going to see right now is, and I'm not I'm an older person, so I will say that, you know, there's a lot of talk within our community right now about the metaverse and Web3 and these kinds of things. We have a lot of, on the retail side, we have a lot of brands experimenting within our community, opening up virtual stores and these kinds of things. I think one of the challenges with that right now is, how do you look and say, okay, are the people who are going and interacting with my virtual Nike store the same people who are actually going to my real Nike stores, or is that a completely different audience? That's one question. I think number two is, how do I then create these linkages? How do I be able to address that audience and target them, you know, in the same way that I do online or in my physical stores or restaurants or environments?
Well, the answer may be different.
Right? It might be different. And so I think there's a lot of innovation yet to happen on how we link those things together, because I don't think that's something that's just a flash in the pan. Even though I'm not a user of it or a consumer of it, I don't see myself there. But I think there's a generation behind us and two generations.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is there's 6 generations out there right now.
Yeah.
Because if you count, the Gen Alpha that's out there, you're talking about up to about 12 years old, but they are consumers because they are on an electronic device or pad from 3 years old, 2 years old, that's put in front of them, and they got headsets on, right? So you've got different technologies within what you're doing in the marketing to different audiences. And so whatever you're building in, whatever you're tracking, there's only one thing I know: they almost all have a phone.
They all have a phone.
Right.
But if you listen to Walmart as an example, right? Walmart launched 2 years ago now almost Playland, which is their metaverse Walmart environment, right? And it's targeted at, that 10 to 13-year-old age group. Why?
Because they want to keep them for life. So how come
We want to
Disney didn't
start
do
them
that?
on the
Why did
brand.
Disney do that?
We want to start them on the brand now, so that once they're, have disposable income and they're shopping and they're doing things, they're familiar with
Okay,
Walmart.
wait, I must be missing something here because now I know what I was saying about Disney, but when I think about
Disney's there
kids,
too.
I think about Disney and McDonald's. Getting kids young with the Happy Meal, what they do, greatest place. But Walmart,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be thinking. I'm trying to think, what's the hook? To
The
get
hook
you-
is these people will be Walmart shoppers in 5 years.
because they're going with their parents into a Walmart. They have to be
No,
entertained. so
they're
they
not
get
going.
connected?
No, they're in playing around with like toys
In the
and things in the playland.
Is it bugged?
What do you mean? Is it?
Playland. I don't know. Is there like sensors in the Playland?
Well, they know who's there. They have profiles. They have information.
Yeah,
They
okay.
have avatars. They have all kinds of different things.
Okay, I'm starting to think about this thing.
Yeah.
Maybe not. So actually, you bring up a good point. So if I were to talk about at least the industries that I track the most or influence the most, the industries that I work in, right? So I've got the travel industry, I've got healthcare,
Yeah.
I've got the restaurant industry with multi-segments. I've got the retail industry, and I'll call those multi-segment industries. Is there some industry that really seems to be, ahead of the curve on this, or is there some operator, retailer, whatever you want, hotelier, whatever it is you want to call them, that you just think, because you're all over the world, so that you just think is really right on the cutting edge of this? And it's just gaming guys. I mean, they have a lot of tech out there, but sometimes they seem behind.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm a big proponent of what the airlines, some of those airlines are doing right now. They're always seem to be ahead on loyalty. They always seem to be pulling, real data from what's happening in the terminals on the ground.
But why haven't
Location
they personalized
analytics,
the
tying that to
experience and
loyalty
marketed in the
programs?
seat? When they took those video screens out of the back of the seat, which is happening more and more, right?
Yeah.
So what they did is they also took away the advertising device. Now I know they forced me to go ahead and watch an ad before I want to watch a movie, but the ads are all the same. It is not personalized for me. So if they've got all this data and they actually know who I am,
They
and
do.
they could do that profile
They do.
on me, then why are they not? You're saying that you're following the airlines. I'm sitting there saying, why aren't they, of all the people, they got you captured there,
Yeah.
hopefully awake, a portion of the flight, and you're tuned in somehow, either on your device or theirs. Am I missing something? Are they actually doing something?
They're not. So the difference between an airline and a retailer, I would say, is the retailers right now, the hottest thing in retail today. Talk to Kroger, CVS, Walmart, all of them. They've all launched their own media networks. They're all monetizing their own store
Like
media,
in-store network.
in-store media networks.
So they need to make sure that
So,
networks.
so they're not just selling
right?
goods; they're selling space, media space now, right? And it's the hottest business in retail today. Airlines aren't doing the same thing, right? Because they don't see themselves as media companies. What they see themselves as is, they're in the business of a pricing mechanism that is constantly shifting based on demand, right?
Right.
And so that's the game that they're trying to maximize. One of the best things I've ever seen, United Airlines, if you go to O'Hare and you're at the airport and you're a United, app user, like the integrated experience of my flight just got delayed 2 hours. I get a notification saying, we see you're at, this gate right now. Oh, by the way, you have 32,000 United points.
And they go and sell you something in the
No.
airport.
It's like, you've got 2 hours to kill. There's 3 restaurants in the airport. Here's how you get to them. And you can use your points to
Absolutely.
pay. And you can use your points to pay.
But that's a direct.
That is a complete experience.
It is, but it also is a partnership. It's a partnership with the SSPs, the HMS hosts,
Yeah.
all
Real-time
those-
flight data from Sabre, all that stuff.
The interesting thing about that is I've spoken at the airport conference before, and what I've realized is that the airlines, you have the people who manage the airport itself, you've got the retailers and restaurant people, and then you have the consumers.
Right.
So you have 4 sets, and then you have security.
Yeah.
You have 5 sets of data.
Yeah.
And in most cases, they are not integrated with each other, nor do they share that data. Now, if United Airlines is doing something to offer it with the restaurants that are there, they did a deal with whoever is operating the restaurants in the airport.
Yeah.
I get that, right? But the airports are not necessarily doing a deal with all the data that they have based on the flights coming in, going out.
But that's where I think there's innovation happening right now. I could show you examples at Munich Airport where that's happening. I could show you examples in Dubai where that's happening. It's just like that is something
And
where,
by the way, if they're
where
getting
we
it-
look at data how data mashups are driving innovation right now, that is.
And if they're getting percentage rent,
the restaurant industry is not doing that yet.
Well, how is the restaurant industry going to do that?
Right.
I mean, you've got these standalone places that they go. Now, I would tell you that the restaurant industry is going to expand into new and different, locations.
Mm-hmm.
So location-based marketing based on the, whether it's a pickup locker, whether it's remote ordering. So, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But I think that each of these industries seem to develop their marketing and the applications available to them almost in a silent.
Agreed.
There aren't a lot of people.
But I think that's where there's opportunity, right?
But that's why you have all
like
these
if I could tell you
together.
that like let's say you're running this Burger King location, okay? And I could tell you that 16% of your customers who come and eat at your Burger King shop at this Kroger, right? And that might be enough for you to say, okay, well, let me go talk to the Kroger and see if we can do a
And I
cross
can do
promotional
that. I can
partnership.
do that without knowing who the customer is.
Correct.
Right. So, right. That is the important. That is actually now. By the way, so some software company, or is it Amazon, or who is it that's actually or Google? Who's pulling all that data together?
The location data analytics guys that we work with, right? Like they know everywhere people go, right? And so it's just a matter of sitting down. We have clients that are restaurant companies that are analyzing who's coming to their stores, to their locations, what market share they have, what competitors those same people are going to, and what other complementary or non-competitive businesses those people are going to. That's where partnerships can be born.
That's why people don't realize it isn't Big Brother following them, because it is not necessarily about them, the personal data, but it's taking their persona and their data.
But I'll give you the example of I live in Canada, as you know, in Toronto. In Canada, one of the big things that's different than the U.S. is we're big on coalition loyalty programs, right? So we have all these loyalty programs that there's 3 or 4 major ones in the country, but within them you have a gas convenience retailer, you have a grocery retailer, you have restaurant chains, you have the movie theaters, that are all part of
people who tried to do it. The credit card companies try to do it.
Yes,
with them,
but it works in Canada. People
right?
do it in Canada. Millions and millions of people are doing that in Canada, right? And so that's where these kind of data.
As long as they don't force you to make decisions on cashing in, that they have different values for cashing in.
Right.
But the points should be collected the
exactly.
same and go out that way. So listen, but we are sitting here at this show. I still haven't figured out why you came out. I didn't expect to see you here, but this is great. I could guess why you came out, obviously. But did you come out with an expectation you were going to see something here that you either have or have not? Or is there something you've seen here at the show that was like an aha moment you just didn't expect it, but you see things in different places in your travels?
No, the honest answer is no. I haven't seen anything that's kind of blown me away. I will say that
The shopping mall around.
I've been here many times to that shopping mall, so it's not
I didn't
new.
mean that the shopping mall.
It's not new to me, but I'll say this. I mean, to answer your question, we've had a long time, relationship with it, like attending at NRF in New York. And so when we saw that they announced that they were coming to Asia, from an LBMA perspective, we have chapters here in Asia. We have big operations in Japan, in Indonesia, and in Vietnam, and pre-COVID here in Singapore. And so we said, okay, let's use this as an excuse to go and see some of our members who are at NRF in Asia, and at the same time, kind of re-engage with our local community here in the region. So,
Well, that's great. So listen, if I'm hoping that everybody, obviously, who listened to this already knew about the LBMA, but let's assume that they might not have. So how do they actually get in touch, and take part in events or chapters that you're doing?
Yeah, just go to our website, which is thelbma, THELBMA.org, and there's a list of events there all the time. So
Great. Well, listen, I really appreciate, you're joining us. I always appreciate the invites to different things, because it's really through these conversations, including the reception you invited me to the other night, that you meet new people, but you hear new perspectives that you just didn't think about.
Right.
And so I just think, even for me, I've learned a whole bunch of things, on this particular podcast itself. So thank you for joining us. And I'm sure, we are all on the road together again, so we're going to see, a lot of these things. So
absolutely. Thanks for having me, Robert. Really appreciate it. And always great to connect with you.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association The IFBTA is the industry's voice of technology within the food and beverage industries, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, as does the LBMA. The exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is that the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share. So thank you for joining us on this episode number 2001 of Techbytes powered by the IFBTA. I hope you'll join us on episode 2002. And I am Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.